All right, it is Friday, the 17th, snowpocalypse on the way to Minneapolis. I'm Doug Splinter. You got ice apocalypse in St. Louis? You are?
Yep. Todd Kidd, that's me, I think.
That's you. You're here, we're here. This is a Flash Friday. We got some fun stuff. We're following through on our commit about desktop analytics. I'm starting it off. I got 2 announcements and then a desktop analytics overview.
So Doug.
Well, I should say Endpoint Manager featuring desktop analytics is my topic.
Featuring. Let's spend a few minutes on this first one here. I'm excited.
Are you?
I am.
I am too. Just go, if you have not tried the Edge, the new version of Edge, check it out. Check it out. It's great. It's Chromium based, but with all the enterprise features and backwards compatibility that you always wanted for those who are stuck having a history of legacy applications that maybe you can't.
None of the yuck.
No, and it's really good. If you have not, as a cool experience, you should check out the progressive web app deployment using Edge of Outlook. Have you been playing with that at all? Are you using the PWA or no?
You know what? I haven't. You're talking about OWA for like Exchange Online?
But the progressive web app.
I have not done. I've done it for Twitter. I have not used the PWA for Outlook. I don't know why.
So go download Edge. Here's your challenge. Go out to Outlook, and then right in the address bar, there'll be a little plus on the right-hand side. And I don't want to queue it up into one of my mailboxes right now, but what they'll do is it'll essentially put in Chrome applications folder, it'll put a link to Outlook, and Outlook now will show up as if it's a taskbar level application. Because if you're using a lot of web collaboration services, one of the problems is visual segmentation of them. They all show up as browser tabs. It gets a little confusing. And a progressive web app allows you to pin Outlook as if it was a traditional app, even though you're using the web version.
I literally just went and did it right now as you were talking.
Yeah, Pretty cool, right?
Very cool.
And so if you're a Outlook for the web user, but you want to feel like you have application segmentation, which is super important because you're trying to get work done. So anyway, just lots of amazing. And we've joined together with Google on the Chromium initiative, start contributing to there rather than trying to go our own way. We announced this a while back, and yesterday or the day before was the actual release day. It was this week.
For sure. Yep.
Now, there is a companion announcement that is not near as fun and optimistic, but in many ways it is. And it's about why I chose the topic of the week around Microsoft Endpoint Manager and analytics and everything else. Because you and I have been saying for the last year, like we did a whole series, probably back around episodes, upper 90s, around how to use Office telemetry and upgrade analytics and get a whole comprehensive view around getting ready to do upgrade on the old Windows analytics platform.
Yep.
And then I announced with a great deal of excitement that desktop analytics was coming. And we were doing a series on it, and then Mechanics released a bunch of videos, so we just linked to those and said the how-to came out, and so we were like, well, we're not going to duplicate effort, so there you go. Just go follow those deployment guides, and hopefully you have. And then we announced this year Endpoint Manager, but what we're trying to do is let people get current, stay current, and understand and reduce the risk around their estate of managed devices, no matter what operating system those are. Which does lead me to a reminder that Windows 7 support ended officially on January 14th.
Yes, it did. Which was also this week. So this week we have a Windows 7 should be done, and the new was there. Now, just because you got to Windows 10, that your journey's not over, so you have to keep carrying it forward. And that was what my subject was today. Was we announced at Ignite a unification of our endpoint management strategy around something called Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And I wanted to dive in a little on that and pay a little more attention to the analytics portion of that than I would the traditional hybrid management. But we're going to go over both of them. And so please, Todd, fire questions at me where you connect, because I'm going to try and kind of do a cold on this. To do this, I have assembled from a series of Ignite decks an actual PowerPoint presentation. And so, which is unusual for me. I'm not normally as much of a PowerPoint person, but there's so many compelling dashboards and visuals that I thought this time that would be a highly appropriate use of the medium. So let's give it a whirl and see what we got. Cool. So first of all, Microsoft Endpoint Manager, what is it? It's a fusion of Intune, configuration management, other endpoint management tools, and like the Azure Log Analytics into a singular new console on the side. And so it takes all that PC management and the Microsoft Intune, all the configuration management stuff, and things like desktop analytics, autopilot, and more, and it brings it together in a single console. Make sense? It does, yes.
All right. So the goal is have that. Now, the goal is that we're going to be cloud powered right? Integrated with M365, all of your devices. So all these things coming together, and that bottom word, analytics, is almost one of the most important things around this visual. If we cut back for a moment, historically, people would deploy System Center Config Man, right? Huge, massive install popular base, great, distribution point caching and OS deployment and all these different traditional things. We're trying to get to a more modern management metaphor where you can just reset windows between people. You're not as re-imaging it as much, right? And get to a more modern control plane with things like autopilot, where devices are provisioned almost as the time they're born from the manufacturer to be yours. And potentially, as you assign it to an individual, you just take a PC that got shipped to you, you open it up, and it's yours. So we're working really hard on these modern management metaphors. However, there's still a tremendous amount of data and telemetry and everything built into Configuration Manager, operations best practices, all sorts of stuff. So we're not going to somehow teleport you to a modern metaphor overnight. But what we can do up in the cloud, we have all these data analytics, visualization, and other sources of data that would be hard for you to mash it together in essentially an on-prem SQL. So what they did is with Configuration Manager 1910, so if you're at SCCM 1910, they essentially are instrumenting this hybrid data model between where your stuff, and we're going to go over the data governance today. We're going to go over where the data lives, who owns it, and how it's processed. So hang tight, because that's really important. If you looked this in the past, you're like, I can't do it. You can, I think, for almost any compliance scenario, because we've been very transparent now about how and where things live. And so essentially that data now goes up into your Azure subscription, right? The vast majority of it. And now we can combine it with our public data sources and draw and make highly conclusive models and predictions. That's so awesome. Example, we have the Dr. Watson database, right?
Yes, we do.
Okay, the Dr. Watson database, for those who do not know or do not recall, is essentially all the crash diagnostics, right? Everything that blows up or crashes or goes boom and thump in the night happens. And if you're sending any of that data up, or anyone on the planet is, all that data goes into our crash analytic. Well, now down in System Center, if you're doing log aggregation and stuff, you've got all this other data. But what was the corollary engine between those two things? There really wasn't one, unless you did a lot of work. And so now, by you taking that System Center data, doing it a hybrid, putting it up into your Azure log subscription, your operational log space inside of Intune and Microsoft Endpoint Manager, we can easily lens those two data together on your data model reads in that public data, and we can show you like which things we know about that are crashing, what permutations, combinations, and all the rest of this stuff. So we have all this amazing analytics capability, because it's all about actionable insight, right? It's all about actionable insight. And so this model allows actionable insight, which is the entire focus of what I have today. Not that there aren't cool control features, but control features are executed based on insight. Agreed?
Yes.
In the past, how many of you really had beautiful, amazing reports out of System Center that you felt were business actionable?
I bet a very small percentage.
It's not many, right?
Right.
It's just because now it's not like there weren't reports, or it's not like we didn't do good things there. It's just a whole different level of approachability when you think about what Power BI can do for visualizations and question and answer and all the data estate. How hard was it to bring that down to that data silo?
People have enough challenge in my space building data warehouses across their core business units. I don't see many people lensing many different internal data sources and putting together Dr. Watson with their desktop analytics, and it just isn't done.
Yeah. So what am I asking you to consider doing? I'm asking you to consider doing Configuration Manager, getting it to 1910 on the current iteration of it, and instrumenting and implementing the hybrid control framework within it.
Can I ask
a
super naive question? So 1910, I know. How realistic or how difficult is it for people to get to that version?
That is realistic, in my opinion, as long as you've been staying reasonably
current.
There's
not a lot of like excuses, good excuses or bad excuses, right?
There should not be.
Okay. Cool.
It's important you get to current.
All right.
Right, and it's not terribly difficult to do so, depending on how good you've been along the way.
Sure.
And so, yeah. And
that was a legit question. I have no idea.
Absolutely. There are plenty of partners who can help you get there too. So this is really important. Okay. So the goal is that you can make informed decisions, right? That you can take that. Now, desktop analytics, as a reminder, is another portion of this other solution area where you're opting into log telemetry going into an Azure log workspace, and you're saying how much goes in, and also making choices as to how much conclusionary data, summative data, or anonymized event-based data is shared to the community for better operations management and defense. Make sense?
It does.
So you have some layers and some choices around that, with the goal that we can actually go do a bunch of compatibility analysis, make pilot recommendations, and do all sorts of stuff. Our goal is end-to-end visibility and simplified planning. And when you see these tools, it's amazing. So let's cut full screen on top of this screenshot here, and we'll stay full screen for a little bit. And so you can say, hey, here are the security updates and feature updates that are going on. So you have this comprehensive number of assets and number of applications that are going on. And we can also then, you can build out a deployment plan. That is this particular screen right here, where you can say, my plan is to go from X version of Windows to X, Windows version whatever to the current version of things. And then you can say, I need to do preparation, which would be analysis for what things are likely to be blockers. So if you look on this particular screenshot, it says 21 assets are currently blocking deployment, meaning there's a known compatibility issues on top of that. And it says, hey, who is in your pilot? And does your pilot include the correct scope of machines? So as far as your identification sequence goes, have you picked the proper pilot devices that should be included? So what amount of permutations does your currently scoped pilot group cover? All right, so cut back. This is super important. This is super important because if we have chosen for accident or coincidence a set of devices, drivers, and models that don't cover our primary application estate for our given user community, we're going to uncover something potentially bad during the far side. Brad Anderson has this amazing video from Mechanics, which I'll add in the notes so it gets up there, that talks about the amount of human hours saved in enterprises who use this process by pre-deflecting issues and being able to resolve them in advance of deployment.
That's awesome.
And it's like, the value is in the billions of dollars, like hundreds or millions of help desk calls, millions of man hours, by just properly putting your pilot group together so that it identifies which driver compatibility things are already known to be there, not net new work. Does that make sense? Just properly aligning operational practices around already known issues. You can pre-remediate them prior to upgrade, and therefore you're dodging all this help desk work.
That's amazing. I mean, this makes so much sense to me just as a data person. Right?
As a data person.
High value. I mean, it makes sense to me why this was difficult, if not impossible, for people before. And I see how high value this fairly straight. I mean, I won't call it easy, but pretty straightforward stuff that we're talking about here.
It's amazing. And this is why you can probably feel, hopefully you can feel my excitement for this process.
Oh, right? I feel it.
Because there's one of those things where, like, one of my customers, I just was reviewing somebody's deployment plan for their enterprise Office 365. They got hundreds of thousands of people heading there. And I'm just kind of talking through the plan with the delivery teams and whatever it is. I'm like, well, how have we handled document migration and compatibility issues around moving to click to run Office? And they said, hey, Doug, we had Office telemetry deployed, and we have a 0.084% document compatibility issue, according to our first 10,000 users analyzed. How amazing was that sentence to get back when you ask people how did the assessment go? It was a qualitative assessment of how many problems they're going to have. A 0.084%. Now, when you talk about hundreds of millions or hundreds of millions of documents being moved, that's still a percentage of documents, but still. Like, where it's at. And we were talking about, all right, well, let's break those down by category, talk about which business units are impacted, and can we do proactive communication to the users to talk about those documents? So we're even looking at proactive remediation of a fraction of a percent, because when it gets to millions, that's real people's documents and work. So we were talking about automation cycles through Flow and doing some things around that. Say, heads up, you might want to crack this document open and take a look at it. And we had like what we call like a virtual preview station, so people could mount it as a virtual desktop, open their document in it, and see.
Yeah.
So it just
you literally took my next question or idea out of my brain. Is really like, this is where Power Automate can come in and just really knock things out. So I think Power Automate's becoming that thing. It's like, you got to learn it, right? As an information worker, admin, whoever, right? Like, that's amazing.
Now this is a hybrid thing. So I just let's cut back to screenshots. There's a decent amount of the System Center console integration too. So here's the North America deployment plan and its integration into the actual System Center console. So this is not only cloud. It kind of comes back and forth onto one. There's this, and we can stay on the screenshots for a minute or two here. There's the prepare pilot. So it talks about, hey, how are you going to do this with System Center endpoint and all the rest of that stuff. Then you get your deployment status as to how things are going from a progression standpoint. How many devices need attention? So how's it been going and where's it going at? So a quantitative analysis as to how it's going, and then ongoing health monitoring as to how the plan moves forward as you go into and are in the midst of rolling it out. So how are we doing on amount? Are we meeting goals for number of application uses and the rest of that kind of stuff? So it's fairly fascinating. I didn't want to do live on this one, so I trimmed it out. This is another example of the analytics we're doing called the productivity score on top of it. So I don't know if you've been seeing that, but essentially it comes through and says, are we looking at communication styles? How are we doing on developing a meeting culture? How are we doing on collaborating on content? And where are you at and what are you trying to achieve? So we're using that data combined with other data to actually give you this productivity score. But if we return to our System Center metaphor, we've also taken that same data from System Center, and there's timeline views as to events and correlations as to when and how people are rebooting and restarting their machines. But almost more important, one of the things we constantly hear from customers is complaints about slow boot ups. We now have a sign in and boot score. We've moved to this metaphor, you and I like it, about secure score and compliancy score. So we're big believers in giving you a scorecard, which is weighted based on actionability, right? And so in this particular case, you can see some of the alerts off to the side, which I trimmed when I grabbed the shot. You can say you have 500 devices that are taking longer than 89 seconds to boot. You have these different things. So essentially, it lets you come through and say, how are you doing on different ones? Yep, there it is. So you can say, hey, you have 560 devices using HDDs. On average, they are 90 seconds slower and sign in 30 seconds slower than your SSD drive devices. So you're saying that as you're in your current configuration, every time one of those people logs in or boots, the hardware performance is having this kind of quantitative impact for your enterprise.
Yep.
How long is it taking to process group policy, right? How long are people booting for other individual ones? And you can see there are categories of group policies broken down. You have 404 devices with slow sign-in times. And you're like, well, okay, what specifically is generating that problem? I'm gonna try and see if it'll let me zoom in here. Well, in this particular case, here are your high performing ones, how many you have, what their boot and their core sign-in time is from slow to fast. Okay, so let's cut back.
That's awesome.
What we're essentially doing, same data, different view. Mm-hmm. Instead of pilot permutations and crash prevention or crash visualization as to current estate and timeline comparisons, this time we're saying, what is the human tax of performance of having older hardware or a lot of group policy baggage or whatever it is? What is the tax? I'm not saying you don't want to pay it. I'm saying, do you know what it is and are you transparent about it?
Right.
Okay. So this is the kind of, it's just a small sprinkling of what you get when you head towards Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And this stuff, the analytics stuff ships in Q1. According to right now, that's the predicted date. So, don't hold me personally accountable for it, but the intention is the boot score, the analytics, the timeline, the rest of these things should be Q1 deliverables from the team. And in order to get ready for this, what do you got to do? You got to get desktop analytics, which is released, deployed. Okay. So you're gathering the log data, which we're going to talk about in a moment, and you have to get to current version of System Center so you can have the hybrid connectivity and data flows.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yes, it is. So what's our requirement? You got to have an Azure subscription for the desktop analytics stuff, right? In order to do all this stuff, you got to have Configuration Manager in order to get the on-prem legacy
version
configure 1910.
1910.
Right. And so you're going to put it into hybrid. You need to have Windows 7, Windows 8.1, Windows 10, 1703 higher with the latest config manager on them, right? With the latest config manager client. And you have to have enabled Windows diagnostic data. And there's the link out there in the documentation to all of the disclosure capabilities on top of it. So let's talk about that data because everybody's going to want to talk about the data estate. So let's cut to full screen on top of this one. So as a reminder, there's basic or enhanced limited, and then there's also the configuration manager stuff. So if you look at the delta, you're essentially saying app usage, deployment data, and health metrics are part of the enhanced limited. If you're at enhanced limited, you can do the vast majority of everything we've talked about. And then of course, you're going to get app inventory for, the assessed app inventory and stuff from Config Manager for predefined compatibility rules. All the Config Manager analytic comes along for the ride as well, because it is doing, for lack of a better term, some edge caching of that stuff. This is the analytics flow, which might be one of the more important things on top of that. I drew this directly from an Ignite presentation. So if you go to Ignite Sessions on Demand and talk about Microsoft Endpoint Manager, one of the content around this talks about exactly where does that data split. So if you look at the pale blue versus dark blue on top of it, notice that essentially you have Configuration Manager, you Azure Log Analytics, we're just a data processor, right? The only thing we're a data controller for, meaning the data has come underneath our governance and we may do what we want with it, is Windows diagnostic data from the diagnostic management service. So the only thing you're really sending us is diagnostic crash type data. Does that make sense?
It does, yes.
Because without that, we can't find out what happened, and we need to correlate it with the learnings of others and device permutations and that kind of stuff. So essentially, let's cut back. You're going to be sending us, for lack, and the definition is in there, but if I could use the Doug level summary, and you're going to want to read the details, we're going to need to have enough data about the machine, the driver state, the application crash scenario to be able to do our corollary responsibilities. But we're not, notice how it's getting consumed by you is through an ingestion framework, which enlightens the entire part where you are the controller, we're just the processor. So it's rather like the old antivirus thing. You're all contributing to antivirus signatures. You're all contributing to crash signatures. But in order to understand the nature of a crash, I do need to know what drivers, what model of hardware it was, and that kind of stuff, what system state was running. So I can find, aha, that's enough forensic detail for me to draw that. But there is a great degree of declaration in the online statements as to how that's handled, which exact data elements are coming in. So check it out and read, because not much becomes under our custodianship, and only that which you would want to contribute to draw data and elements from.
That's a good approach.
Okay, so that's the end of my presentation. The goal: consider this endpoint management strategy, right? What we're asking you to do is bring together Intune, ConfigMan, and the rest of the analytics package into something so that you can make and do things that make complete sense to Todd as a data person.
Love it.
So go do. Go out to the Ignite videos, watch the how to establish hybrid co-management with Intune, get your System Center environment ready, and get your desktop analytics deployment. And then as Microsoft Endpoint Manager rolls out in Q1 and through the summer, all this data goodness is yours.
That's killer, man. That's really good.
All right, Todd.
I'm not even a desktop person. I'm excited by all of that. Yeah.
It's all data and visualization, actionable insights. What's not to love? All right, over to you, sir.
All right. So I just have a few things, a couple Power Platform things as per usual. Some goodness this month for augmentation of premium capacity management. We've talked about before, there's all this goodness that gets opened up to you from a capabilities perspective when you adopt Power BI Premium. But there's also a little bit of management to it, right? Monitoring how much can we fit in there? How do we ensure that people are having a good experience, both from a consumer and a author and refresh perspective? So what we've done is we've added this capacity health center and some, you were just talking about from a KPI perspective, things that are actionable, added some KPIs in. So around understanding how are people waiting for refresh? What about queries and active memory? So this kind of walks you through those different KPIs. Tells you what their status is and allows you to drill in and see, for example, so active memory. So this is showing number of times active memory has crossed the 70% threshold. So really useful for, am I starting to butt up against the ceiling of my capacity, right? The capabilities of my capacity. Looking at some things over time so you can see those trends. This is really great for planning future capacities, or if you have multiple capacities, maybe how to split different workspaces across to fully utilize the resources you have available to you. Same thing for query weight. So this is more around what's affecting the end user, right? So really, really detailed stuff. Again, providing of the data to help you make educated decisions around how to give people a proper and really good user experience in Power BI. So this is really good. Go take a look at this. I know that those of you that are already managing premium premium capacities are really going to be all over this immediately. So check it out. This is good stuff. Oh, and we've also let you to set up your time zone. So this is a constant in reports, and it's difficult to do when you have even a national audience in the U.S., more or less a global. It's like what's your local time zone. So we're now allowing you to set what your local time zone is on these premium capacities, so that you don't have to do that mental math in your head when you're looking at it. So this is good stuff. All right. So this is one, I think maybe this has been around for a bit, but if it escaped me.
And in case you missed it moment.
Yeah, this is in case you missed it. The Power Automate Cookbook. We've had Power Automate templates for some time that are largely like very much use case driven, business domain driven, but these are just plain good Swiss Army knife type stuff. Hey, you need to import a CSV. You need to, where's the one here? Where did it go? It was around parsing bearer tokens. Here we go, parse a bearer token using Flow, which is something that you may have to do quite often depending on the types of flows that you're building. This is just really good.
So these are sample flows that are sort of broken out to solve functional problems?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. So this is just goodness. Check it out. And I think this is also the other difference between this and the kind of the curated templates is this is community driven. So you can submit things and things like that as well. So this is awesome. Now, Doug, I know that this one is of interest to you based on a project that you've been working on internally for the MTCs, the addition of the adaptive card capabilities into Flow, right?
I've been programming adaptive cards for internal syndication.
So does this, have you looked at the newer things that are coming here?
I have not. Okay. One of my, let me ask, one of my challenges has been, I can create, construct, deliver the adaptive card, but doing an authenticated response back from the adaptive card in Teams in a low code, no code has been not an option.
So waiting for a response would be helpful for you?
Yes.
Yes, that was a loaded question. So
yes, that would be helpful.
Yes, so that's what we have here. So you can now post an adaptive card to Teams, but your Flow can also sit there and wait for a response until someone posts back. So this is showing an example of how the surfaces up through Teams, and then my Flow can continue along its way. And they're talking about here what's coming is an enhanced adaptive card designer experience as well to kind of get more tailored. A tailored experience of what your adaptive card should look like.
The only annoyance I found to the adaptive card designer is because you can't poly-instantiate the Teams client if you want to be playing around. You have to keep crashing out of the designer and coming back in, unless you want to use Teams Web for the card delivery and the client for the author. So I do wish you could pop the app out.
So maybe a best practice when you're doing development today, at least, is to kind of go through the web to make the development cycle a little easier.
I would say most definitely.
And again, you're speaking from experience because I know you've spent a lot of time recently.
I've spent a lot of time on these tools. And
this is good. Are you happy to see this?
I am actually very happy to see that. It solves sort of one of my three areas. That one solves one. The challenge I haven't come up with a good answer for is, say you were to put an adaptive card out and there's a button on there that says like get more information about this item.
Yeah.
If you want to call back to a flow, there's no easy authorization method for that callback without doing some complicated work.
Gotcha.
There is if you're using a full bot framework and the rest of it, but if you've delivered it from the flow bot, there's really not.
Okay. Well,
but it's not like it's a huge blocker. Let's put it that way.
Hopefully we start to see some.
Well, that part covers about half of my challenge, and I would imagine that they're getting to the rest. Because if you think about what we can do with UI builder and stuff, all the pieces are out there for me. I just gotta figure out the best practices to put them together. But I have been able to do a lot, and we're releasing that project on Git probably mid-February. So
and it was like all around content delivery, content management, and so
yep.
And there's a nice video here too. So this is actually, I think, a pretty decent sized video. It's kind of walking you through this that was just posted
That's awesome.
by Audrey. So check it out. Awesome. All right. Last thing here, and I think we'll be able to end on time, is if you remember a couple months back, I think late last year, I did it in case you missed it on the launch of the Power Platform COE Starter Kit.
Yes.
We've now kind of done a update to this. So the update is we've added new content, of course. We continue to enhance it over on GitHub, so definitely go check that out. But we've also split it apart into different components, which should allow you to more easily get started, to dive in and to kind of parse apart, what this thing is doing around these different components. So there's going to be some core components that are here around like doing things like DLP and ownership and core governance of the platform. But then moving into things around like compliance, right, and nurturing, which is around adoption. Of course, you need to do those things. So those are two pretty different things. So we're splitting it apart to kind of make it easier on you. We've kind of listed here what those core things are. So for example, under the audit components, app archive and cleanup, right? Yep. And that's a flow that it's going to give you to do that, right? So it's going to be some of these automated ways to automate the approval and disposition of unused applications. Yeah. And then under the nurture components, if you're someone who's responsible for adoption and user experience, this is really going to be more of the things that you're going to care about.
So just so you know, we have we already did one. We closed down January, it was the first week of January, 6th and 7th. We did a workshop one day and a hackathon day 2 for deploying this.
Oh, nice.
At the Minneapolis MTC. So day 1 was you did it as a workshop, you learned about it and deployed it. And day 2, we just called it a hackathon, a governance hackathon, where you could then play around with the solution with the architects and stuff hanging around. So Bart Sneary on my team.
Specifically speaking to the COE starter kit.
Yeah, we gave people actually 3 options. There's an open source Teams governance around Office 365 group governance that Corey Buzzle built out and put out on GitHub that's gotten a lot of traction from Teams engineering and that kind of stuff. So you could come in and you could do Teams governance, you could do Power Platform governance, or Azure subscription role and alignment governance. And so we had all 3 of those projects and people could just come in. Day 1, you picked your track. There was a brief overview of each one. You picked your track, you deployed that thing, right? And then day 2 was you played with it and we all hung around. And so we're doing that again in late February.
All right.
And the content's out there. So if you want to rinse and repeat it in St. Louis, we can.
I was going to say, that's a brilliant idea. Is that largely Corey running that? I may ping him.
Yeah, so it's Bart, Corey, and PJ in order of, I'm from my team, Bart Sneary for Power Platform Governance, Corey Buzzle for 365 Group Governance, and that's PJ cool. Johnson, and all of their stuff is out on GitHub. So these are and the layout for the governance and what the day looks like and, what you get out of it. And so so we can post or tweet that out and let people know. So cool. There you go.
Well, I'd say if you're in St. Louis watching and that's of interest to you, send me a tweet. And you probably won't have to twist my arm too hard to deliver that. Here
yeah, maybe we could pick the same day and co-deliver it between Minneapolis and St. Louis. Just do our virtual window and weld it up.
That'd be fun, man. That would actually be fun. All right. Cool. So
yeah, we should do that. All right. So we're just live solutioning with customers on the air. All right. You guys have a great weekend. Yeah. You guys have a great weekend. I got nothing else. Todd?
And if you're in our 2 cities, drive safe, man, because it's going to be precarious out there. So.
All right, everybody. Take care. Thanks.